That was Upper Arlington's own Colin Gow with his song Podcast. That's our theme song. We stole it. He didn't create it for us. I'm Steve Shoney. I'm the city manager of the city of Upper Arlington. I am here with my co-host,
Darren Schulman. I'm the city attorney for Upper Arlington.
And so we are doing something special for Black History Month this month. And we're breaking a little bit with our tradition.
Our whole 3 episodes tradition is being broken already.
We are. So instead of having a city employee coming in and talking to us in the first segment and trying to make something really dull sound really interesting, we have a non-city employee coming in to make something really interesting sound really interesting. We've got Kristin Greenberg.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thanks.
She is the executive director of the Upper Arlington Historical Society. Kristin, you want to tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about the society?
Sure. So I moved to Upper Arlington in 2013. My very first day here was July 4th of 2013 because I was told I had to be here on July 4th. So we made sure that we made that happen.
And you said, holy cow, these people are crazy.
These people are really into 4th of July.
I said, what an amazing parade, actually, is what I said, compared to other places we've lived. So, I've been the executive director of the Historical Society since September, so a whole 6 months under my belt now. But I've been with the society since about 2014, 15, something like that. So we strive to preserve, discover and celebrate our city's history and in a sustainable way and make that accessible to people. So,
and the Historical Society is one of those groups that they're not part of the city, but we're not 100% cheating because we do have a relationship with them, right, Steve?
Right,
but we are an independent nonprofit, so we depend on our lovely sponsors and members to help support the work that we do.
So you are allowed to have a shameless plug and say...
we need to, yes. We definitely appreciate people's support to keep the lights on.
Okay, great. So we wanted to ask you, because it's Black History Month, we wanted to talk a little bit about the legacy of Pleasant Litchford. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk to us a little bit about who Pleasant Litchford was and why his history is relevant today?
Sure. So if you're not familiar with Pleasant, we'll give you a little bit of a primer. Take you back to about 1830, so 200 years ago. You have a 40-year-old black man who's enslaved in Virginia. He manages to purchase his freedom from his master along with his family, which would be his wife and a couple of sons. And they move to this area and actually end up purchasing land here in what we know today as Upper Arlington. Then it was Perry Township. And Perry Township extended all the way up to Delaware. So it was kind of long and narrow. We're the southern part of that. So you ask how was he able to purchase his freedom? He was a blacksmith, and so the theory is that he was able to earn money through his trade, and he did blacksmith work when he was here as well. He purchased 227 acres of land in what we know today as the high school area, and then the Northern Park area, Tremont Center. So they're communal pieces of land for us today, which makes it very emotional and pertinent. But on top of that, he had a family cemetery established on that land. And that was functioning through the 1920s. I think the last recorded burials were. So Pleasant was also a large member of the greater Black community in Columbus. He was one of the founding members of the Second Baptist Church and was very dedicated to his religious activities throughout his life. He also, we know through some primary documents, deeded part of his land to establish a colored school, as it would have been called. So we have that deed, and we have the 1872 map that shows the little rectangle where the colored school would be, and it's about where the the senior center by Tremont Elementary School is today. But that's unfortunately all we know about that. He died in 1879 at about the age of 89.
You know, one of the things that I love about history is the ability to see and relate to people who've overcome something pretty amazing. And we do a lot to highlight folks in this community who remember from the last 100 years of having done great things. And I think one of the things that you all have done, and that you all have done and others in the community have done, is really lift this up and have this be part of the story of the greatness that has been in this place previously. So I appreciate you guys doing that.
Right. We've tended to focus, I think, a lot with our centennial not so long ago on the last 100 years, but there's definitely a curiosity to expand that and to learn about the people who were here before us. So this definitely is an amazing story.
So this is going to be an ignorant question, but remember, I'm newer here than you. I just got here a year ago. Is Pleasant Litchford, did we always kind of know about this story, or did this kind of get uncovered or become more prominent recently?
That's a great question.
Darren loves it when people tell him. He doesn't have questions. He gets very excited every time somebody does that.
It wasn't unknown in that there was in 1955 when they were building the high school, and we can get into this a little bit. There was dispatch articles and communications about the cemetery. But it's just a piece of our history, I think. Like I said, we've focused on kind of 1918, those early years, because that's when, quote, Upper Arlington, unquote, started, and haven't really pursued a lot of the previous pioneer stories. And frankly, it's, the research Diane Runyon and Kim Shoemaker-Starr did with their book, Secrets Under the Parking Lot, that brought this to more of the public light. And they uncovered a lot of some primary source documents to add to his story. So we knew the cemetery piece, even though I'm not sure a lot of people talked about it or, it was shared. It was known in a way.
You mentioned the school and the book about the parking lot. I guess we should pivot to that for people who might not be familiar with it.
Okay. So, like I said, he established a family cemetery, as was normal during the pioneer times. That's what people did when their family died. That cemetery, we've expanded and done some research, because I think people should understand, Pleasant died in 1879, and Upper Arlington didn't even start till 1913. So there's a span of time, and that land by the high school was not taken in by Upper Arlington until the 40s or 50s. So there's a gap there in time, and over that time, Pleasant's land was deeded to his children, and then it was sold off to non-Litchford people. So the high school, when the board acquired that land, that cemetery was still sitting there, but it had been accepted for access for Litchford family relatives. So this board actually had to go to court to get condemnation proceedings to acquire that piece of land. And then they moved the bodies in 1955 to Union and Green Lawn Cemetery. There were 28 bodies that were found.
So it was a real working cemetery as opposed to one where they find it when they're excavating?
It was a working cemetery in that there were some headstones. The Dispatch article from 1955 has a picture of some kind of broken headstones, and it's a little bit overgrown. So I don't know how active it was. Like I said, the last known burial, I believe, was in the 1920s. But to gain access to that land, they had to go through those court proceedings. What's great, and I'm going to put in a plug for the library now, UA Archives we've been working closely with to obtain a lot of these primary source documents. So this Dispatch article is out on uaarchives.org in the Pleasant Litchford collection. There's also, the schools have been great about being open and really wanting to pursue this issue. They had an independent person go through all their board minutes and extract everything that had to do with the cemetery and made a composite document, and that's available on the UA Archive site. So you can kind of follow the timeline of what was happening in the 1950s to get that land ready to be our school area.
How has this kind of exploration changed the way the Historical Society's done its programming?
Another great question.
I don't get as excited.
He's used to it.
Yeah, I'm like, well, course it is. Darren gets really excited.
Like I said, we were, as you've mentioned, we're kind of cousins with one another, right? So when it came to our centennial in 2018, we were working hand in hand with the city and other organizations to really focus on those 100 years. That's when the story of Pleasant emerged. And, you know, the timing with also the building of the new school area really opened up a lot of possibilities to pursue the cemetery and make sure that, you know, everything had been uncovered, if you will. So the story really took flight, really creating a curiosity, which is what we love in the Historical Society, a curiosity about that time. So, like I said, we've done research on the transfer of ownership of that school land. That is out on our website, which is uahistory.org. We also, there was mention of, you know, was there a Litchford Road? A curiosity about that. And so we pursued that to the point where I can tell you, yes, there was, but it didn't show up on any maps, and it got changed to Ridgeview Road over there by the high school in about 1922, before it was part of Upper Arlington. The whys about that, I don't know, but we've pursued that down a path. We also worked with the UA library to get all these documents about Pleasant out on the archives. And then the biggest thing was, I think the story resonates because we know we have a lack of diversity here in Upper Arlington, and here you have a prominent black man living on a large piece of property in the mid-1800s, and kind of what happened, right? How did things get turned around? And when we sat in these meetings, we heard a lot of people saying broad brush statements about our restrictions on who could own property in Upper Arlington. And we realized we didn't know what exactly had happened. And so we set out last year to do research on that. And that is an extensive piece of our website, again, uahistory.org, under the Learn tab, to talk about the historical restrictions on property ownership, which happened through our property deeds. It's not a city thing.
Yeah, because when I started, people were asking me, can you look at all the city laws about that? And there weren't any. It was just people putting it on their own property, and when they sold it, it ran off the land, and you couldn't do it.
It's the developer. People do have the ability to add restrictions to their deed, but these were what we found is the developer. And here's the interesting piece of that. They started selling homes in 1914, and of course I'm talking down south of Lane Avenue in our historic district at that time. But it's not until 1926, so 12 years later, we see the restriction in the property deed. So all of those beginning homes from 1914 to 1926 don't have a restriction written in their deed. So at the face of it, there is no restriction. There was never a restriction on those homes. So why 1926? Again, we looked around. You have to remember the broader context of life in the 1920s, but it just seemed to pop up. And there was a court case in 1926 of the Supreme Court where they determined that it was okay to place these types of restrictions in property deeds. There was no law that forbade it. And so maybe that Supreme Court case gave kind of the go-ahead to put it in black and white. But then it was pretty prominent through the 30s and 40s, definitely, in our community as we expanded northward. And then again, Supreme Court in 1948 then says, no, the courts cannot uphold that kind of restriction. And that's where that fell off, if you will. They stopped adding it to the deeds. However, if your home was built during that 1926 to 1948 period, you probably have a restriction. And the restriction is only for black people. There is no mention of other races or religions or anything. And I'm talking about what's written down.
By the way, unenforceable.
Unenforceable, and that's what happened in 1940.
People are like,
1948 said the courts can't enforce it, and in 1968 would have been that Fair Housing Act that would have taken it off the table. So, but unfortunately what happened then, and I don't know if you guys have heard of the Northwest Arlington Association. So 2 months after that Supreme Court case in 1948, this Northwest Arlington Association was established. This only affected homes in the Canterbury area. So I'm talking Lane Avenue, roughly Ashbury, Fairleigh to the north, and Riverside to the west. So a contained area of our city. And then, of course, as we grew northward in the 50s and 60s, a small percentage. We estimated it to be about 350 homes. But that Northwest Arlington Association included rules about how you sold your house. And so if I was selling my home to somebody, that then I would have to submit to the association's board the sale information and biographical information about the buyer. And they had the right to approve of the sale or say reject the sale. And if they rejected, the board would buy the house and they would sell it.
They must have had some money to pull that one off.
I'm not quite sure how all the but that was the scheme. And unfortunately, that was present in our community all the way up till 1971, when a man, Alfred Ashley, tried to move in. He was a black man from New Jersey and was rejected. And he and a couple of the people who lived in that area brought it to a Franklin County Court of Common Pleas, and they disbanded the association at that time. So yeah, that was from 1948 to 1971. Again,
I hate to say it, but now we're getting kind of into more modern. I mean, you started talking about 1918. I was like, yeah, but I mean, that's like people are like alive now.
Yes, we definitely, yes.
I was born in 1971. Today is my birthday, so yes, people were alive then.
And happy birthday to you.
Steve was alive in the 1800s, probably at this point.
No, and I think, this is something we need to talk about, and we need to talk about factually so that we start from a common ground. Then we can make changes for the future when we understand what happened, right? So, yeah, in the late 60s, you have a small portion of Upper Arlington that's controlling who lives there. I can't tell you what other types of people were allowed or not allowed. We know from Alfred Ashley that it was, a black man that was rejected. But Upper Arlington's pretty big at that time too, right? I mean, we didn't do many acquisitions past the 60s. So you've got a broad brush of homes that are in the north that never incurred any of these types of restrictions.
Well, and part of what I appreciate about what you all have done at this historical society is to get past it, you got to talk about it.
You got to talk about it. You have to be factual.
And, and being factual about it, saying, this is our history.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we got to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Our history doesn't define us, but it shaped us. And I really appreciate the work that you all have done in kind of making sure that the facts are out there. I'm glad you recognized Kim and Diane earlier. They really did do something to spark the curiosity.
They pulled a thread that starts to unravel some of the stories we may have been telling ourselves. And I agree, we need to talk about it, because only by understanding it can you then look to the future and say, how do we make a change that's lasting?
Yeah. And, I'm also a believer that it's uncomfortable to talk about.
It is.
Until you've talked about it. And then it becomes a whole lot more comfortable.
Yes. And I always try to go back and think, contextually of the times. Right. And I do agree with you, talking about 1918, it's far away and stuff. But things weren't so great in the 60s either. in regards to race, and we have to understand the wider scope as well.
Well, this probably won't be out until after you do your event on the
tomorrow.
16th. Yeah, the 16th.
So tell us how it was in advance. Just kidding.
It was great.
So tell us who you're bringing in so that if folks miss it, they can go back.
Well, there's a part 2,
okay.
So that will be good. So we are bringing in Anne Hagedorn. She is a Ohio author who wrote Beyond the River, which is the compelling story of the Underground Railroad line through Ripley, Ohio, which is about 2 hours plus to our south. And all the tensions from, say, 1830 through 1850s in that area for the people who were pro and against slavery and helping folks escape on that line. It's a nonfiction, well-researched, well-documented, award-winning book. So we're excited to bring her in. And then as a part 2, on April 5th, we're having Leslie Blankenship, who was a local expert about the Columbus Underground Railroad. And so she will, in fact, we have the council chambers booked for that talk on April 5th. And so we'll be advertising that shortly, and she'll get more local with us about the station masters and routes through for the Underground Railroad. Just as a disclaimer, obviously Underground Railroad is a secretive connection, and we do not have any documentation or stories about anything coming through Upper Arlington. Doesn't mean
they weren't advertising their membership.
No, there aren't big signs or anything like that. But I asked Leslie point blank, and she does not know of anything specifically. Doesn't mean we won't uncover it later on, but she will talk to us about it on a more local scope. So we're excited to answer some people's questions about that period of time and how that worked.
All right, great. Well, Kristin, thank you so much. Thanks to all that you do. You've got a fantastic board of trustees that really do help kind of make sure that the community is working to understand our past and bring forward our past so that everybody can understand
right.
it. So really appreciate all that you do.
Thank you.
And thanks
Thank
for being
you for
on
bearing
with us.
with our amazing questions.
They were pretty good. They were pretty good today.
I think they were very good.
All right, we are here this week with Matt Boaz. Matt is the Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the UA City Schools. I got that right? So we're going to talk to Matt a little bit about UA and what's happening in the schools, but we always do start with a little thing we do called Start, Bench, Cut. Darren and I are both sports fans and fans of the Sports Podcast, and so we've got 3.
Yeah, I'm curious which way you're going with this one. We did a little prep before the show.
We did do a little prep. Okay. And in the questions, so we set Matt a couple questions, one of which is favorite kind of music, and he is a fan of 80s and 90s rap and hip-hop. So I'm going to go with, you know what? So let's start with the same questions we asked Katie Smith, because that just dropped this morning. You said you had not listened to it yet. So we asked Katie Smith this set of questions. And we're going to see how you compare to a 3-time gold medalist member of the Naismith Hall of Fame.
I don't.
Yeah.
No pressure or anything, but your choice in music apparently is going to be judged.
So, and this is groupings of rappers: Snoop, Dre, and NWA.
They're like their own crew.
Okay.
Wu-Tang.
Crew. Or a clan, if you were.
And Public Enemy.
Ooh.
Start, bench, cut.
Oh, my God.
Oh, I love how we stumped him. That means it's a good question. He's like pain.
And you said that was the whole crew?
Yeah, you get
Dre
and Snoop, and NWA. They're like, that's a whole one pick.
Yeah.
Step back. I'm starting Dre, Snoop, NWA. I'm benching Wu-Tang, and I'm cutting Public Enemy. I know that's crazy, but...
I mean, honestly, that's probably the way
me,
I would have done it. Not that my score validates yours in any way. But
for me and what resonates with me, that's where I'm going.
All right. That's good. Good. So the other fun fact I want to know about was where you grew up, and you grew up in Van Wert, right?
Van Wert, Ohio.
So I had thought I remembered that it was Findlay, but I was way too big in terms of where I was going.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about growing up in Van Wert.
As an African-American kid, black kid, in rural Northwest Ohio in the 70s and 80s, it wasn't the easiest experience, but at the same time, I find myself experiencing things in life now that make me appreciate it more. It probably wasn't the most pleasant experience because I don't have the tools I have now. Mm-hmm. But when I look at things like if someone is sick, I see the way a community comes together and helps each other and takes care of things. And that's not to say that doesn't happen in a bigger city, but not with people you know. So it's something that I've grown to appreciate more and more. At the same time, it did cause some stresses and confusion as a kid growing up. So it was a rough experience that I truly value.
You mentioned the tools you have now. What led you down the path to your current field of DEI?
Actually, it's a great question sequence because the very experiences that I just referred to and many other experiences that I witnessed made me interested in justice, equity, things like that. Situations that impacted my life or impacted people I cared about that I saw made me want to take action to address those things. And then over time, just with some of the decisions I made in life, I went to the military straight out of high school and gained some leadership skills, then went to college. So as I approached college at 22 with a bunch of 18-year-olds, people would look to me for leadership, and then if something was happening, they'd come to me and say, how would you handle this? And that really got me involved without really trying to be. And then I found myself thinking, this is something I do right now, like as just a decent human being, but there's also a lot of opportunity within workspace for this. And that's kind of how I got into this field.
So did the deep research, if I looked up your LinkedIn profile, deep
background.
Really deep.
So your progression has been, you've worked on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues at the college level, at City Toledo, and now here at the UA City Schools.
Yeah.
How is it different at each level? What has been the thing that has struck you most at each level?
I think, and what my LinkedIn doesn't tell you is that I also did this in the military and as a federal government employee, as a civilian. And so all of those environments are very different because they're focused on different things. The mission of each organization is different, and the focus is different depending on what the organization is created to do. So for me, as an example, working for the federal government, they would send us out into corporations to determine whether or not they were practicing equal employment, providing opportunities for diverse employees, this kind of thing. And so there was a strict focus on just how employees were treated, that kind of thing. But, going into higher ed, you have stakeholders who are not just the employees, they're the students. So you go from having this kind of work focused around people that you pay to having this work focused around not only people that you pay, but people who pay you. So when you have a student paying thousands on top of thousands of dollars to have an equitable experience, it's a lot of responsibility that I really didn't experience when it was fellow employees. So that was a different spin on things. And then going back to local government, I don't think it was so much a difference because of where the work was being done, but at the time it was being done. I worked for a mayor at the time when the nation experienced the death of George Floyd. That was very different because you had all these demands coming from the community, and then you're working for the very person that they see as the person responsible for offering these things. And he's looking to you to say, what do we do? I hadn't really experienced that at that level. Yes, they would look to you for different things here and there, but they were like pushing you out to the front. And that was a very different experience. So,
when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, obviously we immediately go to race, ethnicity, gender preference, sexual identity, that kind of stuff. But I know for you, that's not the only set of lenses through which you're looking at it. Talk to us a little bit about how you and the board and the superintendent kind of think, what all does that include in your portfolio? I mean, how do you look at what is a DEI issue and not a DEI issue?
Well, I think most importantly is everyone has something that makes them diverse. Diversity is difference. It's not a certain kind of difference. It's different. So everybody has an identity that makes them different from everyone else. So when we think of diversity, we think of it holistically as what are everyone's unique needs. So in some cases, as we talked about, it's the educational needs from the standpoint of ability issues, access issues, how a student reads, how a student learns, how they interpret information, analyze information, whether they analyze it, things like that. So you have these learning issues. Certainly the way someone is perceived in society based on physical characteristics can sometimes get in the way. Physical ability issues, use of assistive devices and things like that all impact how someone learns or whether they're able to learn. And all of those things are key to our mission, which is to challenge and support every student every step of the way. So we look at it holistically as how do we take this individual student, allow them to be part of this whole educational ecosystem, and get the things that they need to be successful.
What are some things either that you have done in your role with the schools or that you're working on doing in the schools to further that mission?
I think, spent a lot of time listening and learning and trying to figure out what the needs are here. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is representation. Regardless of what a student's identity is, every student has some level of need to feel represented within the curriculum, within the school district, in terms of the people who lead our classrooms and things like that. So we've worked on a variety of things of reviewing our curriculum, looking to see if there are ways to expand the curriculum, not take anything away from the curriculum, but expand it to include more inclusive information. Looking at how we approach the ecosystem that I referred to, and just the ways that we utilize resources and things like that, and making sure they're inclusive. Everything from representation through hiring and retention efforts, and just making sure we're intentional about how we go about recruiting people to come work in our district, especially our teaching staff. And just trying to be representative of students that are there and students who may want to come later.
I really was struck by your comment about when you worked at the colleges, they're paying you. Mm-hmm. Where do you place high school students on that spectrum? I know young people now are getting more involved in these issues, but they're also not paying you $100,000 to go there. Where do they kind of place on that?
Well, the taxpayers that are their family members are paying. For the schools, they're paying for everything in our community. So they're very important stakeholders. I think the one thing, we've seen a lot of things in our society, and sometimes we don't agree on them, but the one thing I will say that I've seen agreement on is that people care about kids, and they care about the education that kids are provided. They may not agree on how to do it, but they care about education. And so those are our stakeholders. And not just high school students, but all of our students are our most precious stakeholders. They're not always the forward voice put forward. Sometimes the parents speak on their behalves, but the kids are going home, they're talking to the parents are coming with the concerns that they have based on what the students are telling them. So it's important to listen to all of them. If you have a high school student who's willing to speak up, then certainly, we want to hear from them. If we have a high school student who is either too shy or has some kind of an ability issue that requires assistance in speaking up on their behalf, we take that phone call, that email, whatever, from parents, guardians, and we try to, make time, make availability for any stakeholder. But yes, I think regardless of whether you're getting a direct payment, you're getting a payment through taxes, through all of the things that people provide to us, and donations through the educational fund and things like that. I mean, these folks are paying similarly. It's just a different funnel for which it arrives.
You lost me at teenagers and paying for stuff my teenagers don't pay for jack. I don't appreciate it. Yes, boys, and if your friends heard this, I did say that. So tell me something that you see the kids or the teachers doing that gets you really geeked up, that gets you really excited.
The amount of innovation, the amount of creativity that students at all different age levels show is surprising for me, and amazing. I did not know that kids would be that exciting, like in the sense of the way they take everything on and really get out there and try to do these extraordinary things. I think that's how education has changed over the years. We used to have teachers stand in front of the classroom and just kind of push information to us, and we would accept it and regurgitate it on a test. Now you've got people creating these extraordinary projects. They're out presenting their research and scholarship in front of groups of people and things like that. And so, like, UA has this thing called Idea Day. I haven't had the chance to experience it, but when I hear people talk about it, it's so exciting. And I can't wait to experience it at some point, but it's just thinking about the innovative ways that the students in our schools have been developed to think and to prepare and to present is a very exciting thing. So, I think that's something that I've seen that gets me really excited.
We finish these interviews with one final set of questions, and we do this with everybody. So you've been in this job for how long now?
About a year and 4 or 5 months.
That's what I figured, about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. Give us what you love about UA and what would you change about the community?
So I'll start with what I love about UA is passion. There are so many people here that are passionate about life, particularly education, and they show up for kids, regardless of what it's about. They show up. Love that. I think the one thing that I'll say, it's not necessarily unique to UA, it's unique to our society right now, and it's timing. And that is, I've said this to many audiences, so I don't think anyone will be surprised. Sometimes we get so worked up in what we're feeling and what we're thinking that we put a lot more energy into arguing with each other than we do serving our kids. And it's, you're busy making a point that may be a strong point that needs to be made, but it's also the education of our kids sometimes gets lost in it. But that's the passion I just referred to, so it's kind of, you have to weigh. And
I do always have to say I appreciate our partners at the schools.
Absolutely.
Because you all are kind of at the tip of the spear. I know sometimes it feels like literally in terms of community relations and dealing with that stuff, and that's why I appreciate you, I appreciate Paul, I appreciate the whole team kind of being out there and working with us on these issues. So,
well, that's one of the reasons we started the podcast, is so people can get to know the people behind the decision. So it's not just
Absolutely.
City Hall does this or the school district does that. They get to meet the people who are in the community, and you seem like a pretty good guy. Maybe I'm mad at you.
Well, and the other reason we started this podcast is because Darren's new to the community. He has no friends, and so
4 episodes in, I still don't have any friends.
Still don't have any friends,
working.
but we have made it 4 episodes in without the thing that people would change
being us.
Oh,
so thank you.
Good point.
He looked at me when he says, the other thing I would change is, okay, not Darren. Okay.
I will say we really appreciate the partnership as well. I think, from working with some of the, school personnel, administrators, teachers, I think I've heard appreciation for working with city council, city in general, the administration. It's been positive, and I hope to continue to work with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. Darren, you got anything to add?
I just want to say thanks for coming in, and also thank you for helping us. As evidence of the partnership, Matt's helped us with our interview process for our new position for the recruitment DEI position. So that's, again, an example of how we're working together. I do appreciate that.
And I would like to say thanks for having me, and go Bears.
That's
Go
right.
Bears.
Yeah, we're go Bears. We're heading in it. It's
Talk
tournament
about another
time.
cursed franchise, man. Whole can of worms just got to open up. See you next week.